Good morning. Great news out of Washington State this morning. So, Senate Bill 5282, which I reported on about a week ago or so, which would reestablish the Missing and Exploited Children Task Force out in Washington State, run by and directed by the Washington State Patrol. There was a independent advisory, or I'm sorry, oversight panel that would monitor what that body did with the Washington State Patrol at its head because of longstanding abuses. Well, that body went away some time ago, just prior to the Net Nannies, if I understand it, being implemented by then brainchild of the Net Nanny series, disgraced um, sergeant with that body, Carlos Rodriguez. And what Sergeant Rodriguez had done was to conceive of the Net Nanny stings, which would predominantly be proactive stings in which you would go out there and claim to the public that you arrested all these people on an adult dating platform or a gaming platform or some social media where you claimed that they were looking for children. Of course, you had to take their word for it. And what's even more galling and appalling is communications have surfaced from disgraced Carlos Rodriguez that they were not interested in actual tips. In other words, real kids at risk. They weren't interested in those. They were only going to go after these sting cases in which they set you up and they actually attack you in their five key system to develop a crime around you. Why would you do that? Why would you ignore actual kids in danger right this second in favor of developing this weaved, conceived pattern where you attacked people who were actually minding their own business? It's appalling. Okay. But the good news is it looks like Senate Bill 5282, we hear from our people out there, is on track and will likely pass the Senate. Hopefully, it will pass the House and it will be signed by the governor. Very much in relation to that is less good news, Senate Bill 5312. This is the one where uh, Net Nanny, the actual operation that brought about the need for the oversight bill under Senate Bill 5282. The Net Nanny bill, which, as I remind you, would require the law to kick in whenever there was a Net Nanny Metcalf Missing and Exploited Children Task Force run by the Washington State Patrol uh, and under the brainchild of former disgraced Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez. It would require that body of law to look at net nanny cases and not give lifetime supervision or lifetime registration to those cases. In fact, it would cap the registration requirement at 5 years, as I understand it, and supervision at no more than 2 years in most cases. This is very, very significant. I reported already is in keeping with the American Law Institute's 2 year study in which they said nobody should be on um, in the lifetime supervision or lifetime registry requirement. In fact, the lifetime registry requirement is unconstitutional. This was in turn passed by the Michigan Supreme Court, passed by, I think, the Tennessee Supreme Court took some action because the Department of Corrections there refused to let people out after their time. And we have worse abuses going on in Moose Lake, Minnesota, with community custody or civil commitment, actually, in which after you do your time, the Department of Corrections there says, well, I think you're really bad, so we're going to keep you indefinitely. These sorts of things are starting to be rolled back, and it's damn well about time. So, back to Washington State, Senate Bill 5282 to reimpose an oversight panel, which then Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez said, we don't need this. We're doing a great job. Just trust us. Well, whenever you just trust the police, in this case, as well as many others. I don't want to trash the police, but it's true. When they are involved with overreach, they go way too far and abuses begin. When people are watching them in a democratic republic, they are much more constrained. There's less happy news about Senate Bill 5312. That was the Net Nanny sting bill I mentioned, where you had supervision and registration that's rolled back to just a few years. Well, whereas Senate Bill 5282, the oversight panel, looks like it's going to cruise to passage, this one looks like it's stalled in a work group right now. Senate Majority Leader Dingra out there, uh, to whom I had written on behalf of many out here and across the country, including those incarcerated who cannot defend themselves, has put 5312 into a work group with two committees, and that's good. So it's still on the radar, it's still being looked at, and hopefully will still be passed next year. However, the opposition will be very strong. We had over, I think, 300 and some signatures. They had just a few. Uh, One of the curious arguments I want to focus on here from the sheriff's department out there and from the prosecutor out there, a woman whose last name is Harmon. I think it's Lisa or Laura Harmon. I can't remember which, but she's one of the prosecutors out there. And starting with her point, just 2 points, one for each of these characters. Ms. Harmon says, "Oh, well, you don't believe all those 300 and some people and and the psychologist who's talking here and all these people who are claiming that they are being abused by the police. Don't believe them because we know that the mind, the mens rea, the idea for this occurred in the mind of the people that were arrested by police. Yeah, that's not true in many cases. We can't say it's not true in all cases. I'm sure somebody certainly did, but it's also true that if human nature is somebody certainly crossed the line and intended to do that, it is certainly also true that the police overreached. And that's exactly what happens in many of these cases over and over and over again. The mind who developed this is not the person on an adult site looking for adult companionship. It's the person who has the surveillance technology, the person who has incentive and motivation because they're getting lots of money from federal grants to people who look good when they can show all these statistics racked up. And on the subject of statistics, it was pointed out that very few people are gathered in these stings who have predilection for harming children, and that none of these people were on any sort of list beforehand, and none of these people seem to be really looking for children. And so, in these proactive stings, which the Missing Exploited Children Task Force said are absolutely essential, and which Carlos Rodriguez said are more important than actually looking for children who are in immediate danger. The head of the Sheriff's Association said that the reason they don't have statistics on this that people are complaining about is because, but for the fact that law enforcement arrived in the nick of time, there would have been a child in danger, and that was very, very important to them. So think about that for a moment. The supposition that if we hadn't gotten there in the nick of time, somebody would have been harmed is absolutely preposterous. It just demonstrates more and more how reckless and out of control these particular stings had gotten. And don't forget, where did Carlos Rodriguez go? Well, where does one disgraced person go? He goes to another disgraced operation, and that would be Operation Underground Railroad. So, in the period where Tim Ballard is on his demise, Carlos Rodriguez was right there to slip in, along with two of his supervisors, we're told credibly by investigator Frank Wilson, who testified live or testified live remotely, but nevertheless testified on the history of the Net Nanny stings and the history of Metcalf's involvement with it. So former Sergeant Rodriguez goes to double dip. Not only does he get his nice pension, which is denied other public officials who like me did nothing, but he also gets to start over again with Operation Underground Railroad, pretending that they're actually out there helping kids avoid being abused abused and trafficked. So this is a tragedy to some extent, that we did not get 5312 passed, the Net Nanny sting operation um, roll back to some extent, but it is nice that we have 5282 that looks like it is doing well. So we'll update you as it goes along. This is Norman Michael Ation for I.C.A.C. Unpacked. Have a nice day.